Okay, welcome back. We have come to the second of our two regulator spotlights today. This time we'll be hearing from Matt Jacques. He's the chief accountant in the SEC's Division of Enforcement. Matt returned to the agency in October of 2018. He was previously a senior forensic accountant in the SEC's Boston regional office from 2007 to 2013. He has nearly 2 decades of experience as a public accountant, a regulator, an expert witness, and a forensic accountant. And has been doing both public accounting and forensic accounting at several big accounting firms and the SEC during that time. Matt, we really appreciate your time and for you joining us today.
Thanks, Bruce.
And also, I'm very pleased to introduce Jason Flemmons, who will be our moderator today. He is a senior managing director at Ankura Consulting in the Washington, D.C. office. Jason has over 25 years of experience in forensic accounting and corporate investigations, technical accounting, and auditing matters. And he is himself the former deputy chief accountant of the SEC's Division of Enforcement, where he served for 12 years. So, Jason, we're really looking forward to sitting in on your conversation with Matt. Leave it to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Bruce. And Matt, thanks for joining. It's a good excuse for us to get suits on and talk accounting together. Although I have to say I was a little, I don't know about you, a little worried about remembering how to tie a tie this morning. It's been close to 9 months for me, but Bruce, he's not on anymore, but he loaned me his clip-on, so I was able to get past that. But you're looking very authentic.
Thanks, Jason. I'm glad to be here with you as well. And I'll just get it out of the way before I get started, the standard disclaimer that the views I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Commission, individual commissioners, or my colleagues on the staff.
All right. So why don't we jump into it? You and I have known each other for a long time. You were, before you came to take on the position of chief accountant, you spent 6 years or so in the Boston office as an accountant in the enforcement division there, which is where we overlapped and worked together on a number of different things. You then left for private practice and then returned as the chief accountant. So just kind of curious, maybe to kick things off and hear from you on, after a couple of years as the chief accountant, what are some of the main differences between your two roles and your experiences in those two different offices?
Yeah, so when you had told me you might ask a question like this, it caused me to go back and reflect a little more on those days. And I've drawn differences as I've been in this new role on occasion, but what it definitely caused me to do is to realize that I really miss those days as a staff accountant in the Boston office. Being a staff accountant in the enforcement division was probably one of the best jobs someone like me could really ever hope to have.
Something tells me they would take you back.
I don't know. I like to think that, but I've seen the quality of the folks they brought in to replace me, and I'm not sure I'd meet the standard these days. And look, I got into accounting, probably into accounting and forensic accounting, like yourself, because I really enjoyed organizing information, sort of the forensic look back, really digging into the details, figuring out how things were not just accounted for, but accounted for at the time, what assumptions went into that, what the processes were behind that, and doing that in forensic accounting. It's a really exciting job. Now, given that job has a lot of long days of poring over spreadsheets or working through a general ledger or looking at emails, but I find the rewards of really getting in there and doing that detail level work and making the connections, being able to tell the story of how something originated as an economic event or activity and ultimately became something that was represented in the financial statements. I found that, and I continue to find that really satisfying. And it's also funny because in this role, as many folks around the division know, I'm often offering to get involved in some detailed level analysis if the right opportunity presents. And a couple of people actually took me up on that. I hope they don't regret it. It was certainly fun for me to sort of roll up the sleeves again and work out some spreadsheets and build out some models where I thought I could be helpful. But look, I was blessed to have some amazing colleagues, attorneys and accountants I worked with in the Boston office. 6 years there were a fantastic experience. I got to work with you as well, who were in your position as the deputy chief accountant at the time in the home office. And I thought you were very kind during those years of bringing us into not just regional matters but national matters. And that was really exciting for me once I realized that we could sort of step up outside the bounds of the Boston region and work on different matters. And that was always very exciting. Now, sort of sitting in the chief accountant role, it's certainly different, and it's a fantastic job in some different ways. One, just from a sort of intellectual curiosity standpoint, it's just amazing to be able to sit in the seat and look across the pipeline of accounting, disclosure, and auditing cases, and see all the different matters that we're investigating in that space. Also, being able to observe and work with all the different teams across the division, not just the home office, but across the 11 regional offices as well. I find myself constantly learning new approaches to different problems, particularly how we tackle some investigations. And I've also learned some things in this role. Charles Wright, who many people know, our chief counsel to this position, he's imparted a lot of wisdom on me. And the first is sort of do no harm. We get the benefit of being able to consult and learn about and help where we can on different financial accounting, auditing, and disclosure matters across the division. But I've also recognized that we have an incredibly talented staff, and while they may not all do things the same, they are incredibly effective in getting to results, doing what are some of our more complicated investigations. As everyone knows, the number of entities, documents, and information we have to tackle in these financial accounting matters can be tremendous. And also, just continuing to find different ways to support the teams. I know when you and I talked early on, when I was considering taking this role, you pointed to me at least to a lot of different ways that you thought you were able to reach out, make yourself available for consultation, and encouraging that. And so, that's been something I've been spending a lot of time on as the chief accountant. Also, in something I call sort of improving the plumbing, information flows, within the building and with other agencies. I'm a big believer in, if we get the structure right, if we get the controls and processes right, we can really lift all boats. And we continue to do that, and we continue to, I'd say more on the margins, but even those little incremental gains can be beneficial, whether it's, how we share different sort of breaking trends within the building with other accountants, how we share across potential silos with other divisions and offices like OCA, corporation finance, investment management, IM, but also with other agencies, how we interact with the PCAOB, and how we share information with them. Really been trying to work on that, as well as some bigger efforts. Director Avakian has mentioned some recent public comments, as well as recent speech at University of Pennsylvania. We're constantly looking for ways to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our investigations. We're conscious that the sooner we can get to an action or maybe no action, the better that is for all parties involved. And so, given the complexity of these financial accounting matters, we're constantly thinking about ways to do that. But yeah, no, it was a good question. It definitely afforded me some time to reflect on the days of going through the docs and working with the teams in Boston and sitting where I am now. So thanks for that.
No, that's great. And you mentioned getting involved in consultations on matters. I trust, is that happening at various stages throughout investigations, during an investigation, also at the tail end? What can you say about that?
Yeah, so, and this sort of goes, links to or goes hand in hand with the idea of, looking to be more efficient and effective in how we investigate these types of matters. And, the start of that is a triage, right? Effective triage up front. And with that comes consultations. And one thing I've tried to do, and I know my predecessors have tried to do, and we continue to try to do, is be available for consultation sort of early and often. I think that's the key. It's impossible for any one enforcement accountant across the division to be an expert in everything. So finding that expert in the building or sharing information across investigations can be incredibly beneficial to us, sort of, limiting how much you have to get up to speed on a particular matter. And it could be a simple thing of saying, hey, we're seeing this issue in 3 other matters. We should all get on the phone and talk. Or it could be something more complicated where maybe we have to get an official consult with OCA Maine or corporation finance and really get into some technical issues that we need to hash out early on. But the sooner you do that, the sooner you can develop an effective investigative plan to tackle what's in front of you.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. And just on that topic too, we have a lot of securities lawyers that are probably watching this, hopefully watching this, and didn't take their break when they saw the 2 accountants were going to be talking to each other. But what can you say about because there are cases that we all get involved with. You run into some really thorny, but maybe even judgmental accounting areas, and there are differences of opinion between either the lawyers and the consultants and the SEC staff, and they'd like to have a meeting and they want Matt Jacques, to be there to be able to hear this. Do you have any suggestions kind of for that process on A, whether that's advisable, and B, if it is, kind of how best to go about doing that?
Yeah, look, I think, we have those meetings, whether it's part of the formal Wells process or maybe even before that. I certainly make myself available as much as I can. And if the teams, I ultimately defer to our investigative teams, if the teams think it's advisable for me to be either attend a meeting, listen in. Some of them invite me early on to get backgrounds on certain things. Some of them invite me, as you know, as you've seen, to attend a meeting where we may be discussing a specific accounting issue, as you're sort of alluding to there. And so I think that can be very beneficial. Some advice I'd give for that I've given at other panels is, having the right expertise on both sides is really critical. And so if an issuer or their counsel or consultants are going to come in, it is helpful to have the right expertise there, particularly if we're talking about something that is really core in the accounting and how something's being accounted for. Having people there who can speak that language fluently can be incredibly helpful to the discussion. The other things I often talk about is, make sure that there's sort of no omissions, right, in the information and facts presented. And that's especially true if it's early on in the investigation, right? At the end of the investigation, usually the record's been fairly well sussed out. But early on in the investigation, if there's a point to sort of consult on, getting everything out and making sure that sort of all the facts are on the table can be helpful, because I think we've all seen the downside if we have some of those early presentations or meetings, and then ultimately new facts come to light that may change the judgment. And granted that there's sort of a balancing there, right? A lot of times the company is still learning facts, so there can be caveats and whatnot put on that. But really making sure that the full record's out. And then finally, this is sort of a pet peeve of mine. Please don't come in and tell me this is just a timing issue. That sort of drives me crazy. I appreciate the difference between an empty box scheme and revenue that was ultimately recognizable later. But last time I checked, we are pretty much in a financial reporting regime that does include timeframes on the balance sheet and income statement. So it's a note worth making. It's not a note worth belaboring if you're having a meeting.
Timing matters to the SEC and to investors, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Great. Well, let's maybe kind of move on and talk a little bit about what your group has been doing with accounting matters, the types of issues that you've seen over the past year, whether we're seeing kind of the same, run-of-the-mill RevRec or other types of cases, or whether there have been any other novel areas that you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call any of our RevRec cases run-of-the-mill. I mean, we certainly continue to have a number in that area. And look, looking back at the fiscal year, as you all know, our fiscal year ends September 30th, and it's a good time to sort of stop and take a look back to see what we've accomplished. In the accounting disclosure space, we once again had matters sort of all across the spectrum of the financial reporting process. We had some matters in that RevRec space And I think of cases like Manitex, Revolution Lighting, and others. We had cases, I want to say 3 or 4 cases in the non-GAAP metrics and key performance indicator space. And that's an area where we continue to see activity, and we continue to see our teams bringing actions. We had a number of cases in the material misleading disclosure space. And then, as always, cases where the companies, failed to properly keep books and records or devise and maintain adequate internal accounting controls. And so stepping in and sort of looking back over the year and thinking about it, really continued to not really, we always get the question, what are you focusing on? What do you try? And it's really the financial reporting process, which is where we've always been, and where I expect us to continue to be. And then on top of that, looking at gatekeepers, auditors, making sure auditors are upholding their professional responsibilities as they conduct audits of these issuers, and in particular those where we bring actions. We will continue to, and we have asked the question, where were the auditors? Was there something they were not told? Did they maintain their obligation to fulfill their professional duties by adhering to the professional standards? And we're going to continue to see those cases, I believe, investigate and bring actions where appropriate.
Yeah, and what can you say about kind of the volume of accounting investigations that are happening? I mean, you hear people in the industry, say we're not seeing as many. I think there are other people that are still seeing, quite a bit of activity on the outside. But just curious from your perspective, have you seen any change in, the composition or just the overall volume of accounting matters that the group is working on?
So our pipeline continues to be strong in this space. I often read or get the questions around what we're spending our time on and how much activity our investigations are not public. And so if you're using actions, right, you can almost get a sort of false correlation. But I've said this many times since I've taken this seat, our pipeline is full. And that doesn't mean we're going to bring actions in all these cases. In fact, we don't bring actions in all of our investigations. But we are certainly active in the investigation of financial accounting, disclosure, and auditing matters. And I expect us to continue to be. Now, the composition of that pipeline, I don't think it's deviated much from historical norms. People will make, again, assumptions based on the recent actions we bring, but recognizing that our sort of length of time from opening to action can be, on average, a little under 3 years. It's hard to sort of draw conclusions from that. But as I've been here in the past 2 years doing this, again, we continue to focus on the core areas: financial reporting. There's restatements that seem like they warrant investigation. Tips, complaints, and referrals that come in, referrals from other agencies, as well as our proactive efforts that have been recently talked about, and some matters we've brought in the past month.
That's great. And you mentioned a minute ago, internal controls, which, as we all know, is a typical component of financial fraud or reporting type actions. And there have also been, here and there, some standalone internal control cases over the years. What's the latest stance, or what are the latest efforts, in the internal control area?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say there's latest efforts or latest stance. I think when we think it's appropriate, we bring those cases. We're thoughtful. If you look at those cases, I think we're thoughtful about the orders and the public documents outlining, where the violation occurred and why. I think that's something that I've been focused on and continue to focus on. And our teams are focused on it as well. We don't bring an internal controls books and records case every time there's a material weakness or a restatement. We absolutely don't do that. We are thoughtful, and we think about the message and how that helps issuers out there, as well as investors.
Yeah, well, that's good. So you also mentioned proactive efforts, and there have been proactive inquiries and risk-based investigations that have been occurring over a number of years. You and I worked on some together when I was at the commission, and they've taken various forms, including getting more formalized with the Financial Fraud Task Force, and then the fraud group that was developed. So what's your view, or what's your current experience, kind of both before you were chief accountant and also now in your current role with regard to proactive efforts?
Yeah, so let me make a couple points on this, and I want to echo something that Associate Director Melissa Hodgman said this morning on the financial fraud panel. There's been a lot of talk about the SEC, and this is from some of our recent cases, using data to identify potential securities laws violations, and that's not a new thing, as Melissa said. That's something that has been going on for decades. And it's something that, yeah, we may have better computers, but the concept is not something new. And that leads to my second point. People often talk about data analytics, and I think there's a tendency for people's minds to drift to the world of science fiction, movies where the big computer machine is spitting out an answer to predict the future. And while we have certainly advanced in the computational abilities we have available, I mean, these are still just tools that our people, our most important asset, use. And the success of these initiatives is really based on the expertise and the application of these tools by our teams investigating these matters. I mean, if you think about it, you still have to hypothesize the potential violation and how the data might apply, identify the relevant data sets, obtain those data sets, clean the data, which I know in your current role, Jason, is probably the biggest sort of time commitment in these efforts. Cleaning the data, it's really an underrated workflow in this whole process. Then do the analysis. And once you've done the analysis, you still have to do a standard investigation and potentially action on those things. And so that sort of takes me to my final point on this, which is, ideas are generally pretty cheap. I've said this a lot. Anyone can come up with an idea of a potential application of some of these tools, but where the money's at is really executing on these ideas. How are our people doing those nights and weekends type work to scrub the data, get the data set, figure it out, and investigate on it? And that's what I've been most impressed by in this iteration for me at the SEC is the number of people we have now, not just a small group in a room, but really across the division, across the regional offices, who are willing to come up with that idea, but then execute on that idea, really put the time and effort in. We have some really top people who, this isn't their primary focus, they didn't go to school for it, but they're able to take these skills and apply them in this manner. And I think the results speak for themselves. We've been able to bring some, I think, important cases using this as a source of the matters.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of pre-investigation work that needs to happen before the traditional investigation takes place, right? Bruce, I take that as our cue. We had a lot more to talk about, but we'll take it on next time.
Thank you very much, Matt and Jason. Terrific look at an area that's really been important at the SEC of late. Thank you. So our next panel on managing and defending internal investigations will begin in 5 minutes at 3 p.m. We'll see you in just a few minutes. Thank you.